Hello, people of the world. Welcome to Fieros Reborn. Here we are, here today in the channel of room, the room of channel, the room where we channel the room. Hi. I just want to spend a moment to make the lighting a bit more light. Okay, very slightly more light there. And hello again, Fieros Story Time. Now, I don't know if you can sense this, but I can. The atmosphere in the room is slightly more clear than usual, and this is not in terms of like air pollution or anything like that. It's not to do with smoke or dust or anything like that. The room has stayed the same. Nothing has changed in the room. But what has changed is energetically me. Me. I have changed energetically from yesterday to today, only very slightly. But I have a more clear heart space today, ever so slightly. So if you feel as though the image looks clearer on the screen, that is why. It's nothing to do with anything else. Nothing else has been changed. You know, if I look like I'm bigger or smaller, or there's more space in the room, or that I'm further away from you or closer to you, I assure you nothing has actually been changed in the setup at all. It's just a function of how my energy system is working at the moment. There's a lot more clarity in my perceptions of items in the room here, in terms of I can see things more clearly. Like, it's very strange how the energy of you, your energy, will colour your perception of the things around you in your life and in the world. For example, I feel as though there's just more of me on show here, even though there's not necessarily more of me on show, but I feel like there is more of me on show. You know, emotionally more of me on show. There's been a lot of weight cleared off my chest, and I think it's to do with a few things. It's to do with the heat. The heat has been really working my system, like feeling like I'm doing exercise. Just by being alive. It's very hot at the moment. If you're watching this at any time past July, then this was filmed in July in Britain on 2018, and it was very, very hot period of summer that we've had. It's been going on for fucking ages. It's the hottest summer that I have known for a long, long time. In fact, I don't remember experiencing a summer this long ever in the whole history of my life, because partly I wasn't really paying attention to how long the summer was when I was younger, but also I think this feels like a particularly long summer, and it must be. I mean, this has been the hottest day today this summer, and it just feels like it's been going on and on and on for ages. Another thing that is bringing about this sense of clarity is I've been doing these story times and been offloading stuff off my chest continuously for like an hour each day, and I suppose that's finally starting to feel like there is more space in my heart for having got rid of a lot of crap off it, or like for lifting the emotional aspects of these stories so that they become more neutral, so the burden of them is released. You know, I feel like they've been contained inside me for ages and they've not been set free, and now they're being set free. So the stories are the same, but they just don't have that same kind of pain feeling around them anymore. They're not as heavy as they were, and they don't feel contained and contracted inside me. They're like, okay, whew, yeah, I can talk about them now. This has taken me a long time to be able to talk about these things openly. Obviously, I'm not using people's real names, and that's going to stay the same because I just feel it's fair. I feel it's a protection on other people. It's highly unlikely they will ever watch these videos, but I don't want them to be identifiable from the videos. You know, if I start going around telling people's names, then people can look up other people on Facebook and Instagram or wherever it is, on Google, and it's just not healthy for anyone. So names are going to continue to be what do you call it? Not present, changed to Mrs. A and Mr. B and Mrs. C, who we've got coming up later, and it's just going to be like that: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you know, it doesn't really matter who they are specifically from your perspective, because I say so. Because it's all human experience, really. At the end of the day, isn't it? They could have been anyone on one level, because it's all just like the same. Me interacting with other people, human experience. Me interacting with other people, human experience. Human experience. Human experience. You know, it's not like none of these people that I bumped into were God. You know, everyone is equal, so everyone has a certain kind of respect value to them as being a human person. So although everyone is unique and special and individual in their own way, we all are the same on one level as being, here we are, we're alive, we're human. Don't know what I'm saying this for. We are human. Let's carry on with the story. So yesterday, where did we get up to? Well, I was going back through a lot of secondary school stuff. Wait, I haven't finished talking about the clarity thing. So the chest space. I've been doing work to clear this for a long period of time. One of those works was to stop smoking, because my whole chest area was starting to kill me, basically. I was worried I might have cancer. I don't think I do. And if I did, I've destroyed it by the power of my power. But yeah, this whole chest, top of the chest area was pretty wrecked for a while. And now, 8 months on, woohoo, yes, 8 months on, I feel like it's coming back online. It's feeling better. There's slight residues of pain in there, but I will contrast it with how it felt before. Like when I first started to stop smoking, when I first quit smoking, my chest basically set on fire virtually constantly for about 5 months. Well, it was constant for about 3 months, and then it was intermittent for the next 2, and then it was less and less from then on. And over the past month or so, there's been hardly any turbulence really in that area, and it would also extend across my shoulders and down into my arms. My neck would be pulsing with a kind of feeling there. I would get leg twitches as well. Yeah, and those have got out of the system now. Occasionally my balls would really go like burn really hard, and that wasn't a pleasant experience. Oh, yeah. And what else would I get? Oh, I told you about the thing with it was like eating my brain from the inside. I got rid of that one quite quickly. I just focused on it, and I think water helps. Water helps lots of things, actually. Quick little tip: if you're feeling stressed, drink a load of water, not too much, but like a pint or a litre, really, really quickly. And what it will do is it will just start to relax your muscles straight away, and that will help your stress go down, because I don't know, but the water floods into the cells, into the blood, and it just relaxes you a little bit, because while everything's all tense and contracted, dehydration can actually add to all the tension in your muscles, because if the cells aren't able, they don't have enough water, then they get all contracted, don't they? They're like starting to shrivel and stuff. So if you put some more water into your system, then the cells can relax a little bit more, and you can go and your whole body starts to relax a little bit more. So yeah, water, or a dilute type of drink. So, because water can get really fucking boring, I tell you that much. Fuck water sometimes, fuck water. So fucking boring. Plus the water in our taps here tastes like arse. I was writing in my book, quick little sales pitch, Psych Ward 1 on lulu.com is available to buy. I was writing in Psych Ward 3, which was the third one, which will be coming out eventually when I've typed it all up and processed it and filmated it. La la la. Yeah, I was writing my book that the water out of the tap here tastes like a sweaty ox. Oh, grim. It is grim sometimes. Just depends. Sometimes it's grim, sometimes it's alright. And the upstairs tap is better than the downstairs tap. I figured that out. We had a new boiler put in, a new pump put in a while ago, and that changed the taste of the water, and I'm still not used to it. I'm like, I swear they've done something. Did they poison it or what? And this is not like a paranoid thing. It just tastes slightly different. It's off. It's like, oh, I swear it was better before. Maybe it's just that I'm not used to it. Maybe the previous water, if I'd started on this one and gone to the one before it, I would go, oh, this water's just not the same. But yeah, this water sucks. So on my list of things to buy is like a good, nice filter filter jug, because it is better through a filter jug. Anyway, I'm just chatting shit. Okay, so yesterday I've done the heart clearing thing. So if you clear your heart space, if you clear your internal energies, suddenly the world outside will appear more clear. Oh, that's rhymes. Will appear more clear as well. So clear your internal energies and you will start to see and experience the outer world and your relationships more clearly, because you're seeing them and experiencing them through a more clear instrument. Like if your body is an instrument to perceive the world, then if you clear up how it feels on the inside, then your perception and your ability to sense the outside world will clear. So you will feel like your life starts to feel clearer. You know, the outer stuff in your life starts to feel clearer because you're perceiving it more clearly. Yeah, now I'm rocking and rolling. Yeah. So I suppose I should say, how can you clear your system? Well, start detoxifying for sure. Honestly though, I wouldn't have paid attention to that message if my body wasn't starting to scream at me. I only stopped smoking because I felt I had to, and if I carried on, that I may die from it, as in I might have caused such damage that it would be irreversible. So I was like, okay, yeah, body's saying stop now. Because I missed it. I liked smoking, actually. I enjoyed it as a pastime. I liked the whole social aspect of it. I liked the rolling of the things, and I liked the struggle of trying to beat it. It's like perpetually struggling against it. I liked that. It gave me something to aim towards. And then I came off it and I felt like, I still feel a little bit like something's missing. Like there was a thing in my life that would punctuate my day. And every now and again I go, what am I normally... Oh, this is why it feels a sense of emptiness, because they would usually fill that emptiness with having to smoke out the window, or going outside, or leaving wherever it was that I was at, like if it was a pub or a club, or if I was doing work in a cafe or coffee shop, then I'd go outside for a smoke. So there's that sense of, there's something I would normally do now, and it's missing, and I'm like, shucks. Like you have a pause, and I would realise if I was going for a bike ride, for example, I would occasionally pause during a long bike ride and have a smoke, which is obviously ridiculous considering the health. You're trying to boost your health by doing a bike ride, and then you're trying to destroy your health by having a cigarette, which I always found interesting, that people come out of the gym and straight away they light up a fag. It's like, what is the message there? What are they doing there? How do they figure that shit out in their head? Like I've got this acquaintance who I know, who's like a personal trainer, and he's like puffing away, and he's a personal trainer. He's a personal trainer, really, really fit, like strong, athletic, knows his stuff, and then he's going out for a fag. And it's like, how does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. But then it does when you're addicted, you know. Yeah. Alright, so let's try and tell the story. I feel like maybe I'm trying to avoid the story today. I was a bit worried that I might get pain coming up while I tell the story today, and not wanting to go there. And also, my mind's a bit blank, honestly, as to what happened, why I'm telling the story, where to go next. Let's just revisit the point of what I'm doing this for. Why am I trying to do this? So I'm telling this story about my past to get it off my chest, and there's a certain satisfaction I get personally from telling my story. I have a certain need to tell the story from my perspective, because there have been many different versions of this story told by other people. My dad has a version, my mum has a version, my brother has a version, my gran has a version. I was featured in a BBC Three documentary which has some tellings of it. There's a website that my dad and I created while I was still not quite back to a feeling of happiness, mental health. Mental health sucks as a term. Happiness. I was depressed when I was writing this account of some of the events during this particular psychiatric period in my life. And I wasn't quite ready to talk about them because I was still trying to figure out myself, like, well, what actually happened and what was the truth while I was writing it. So it wasn't a particularly clear version of the truth. My head wasn't clear on what had happened. So there's various different accounts around about what happened, and I've also had counselling in the past where I skimmed around the things that happened in this time period in my life, which was between 2006, no, probably 2005 to 2009, really, is the bulk of it, 2005 to 2009. Where my life just went into a massive meltdown, a mulch, a really interesting adventure happened, and then I ended up in a psychiatric ward and medicated to fuck and trapped in there for a period of 72 days, which I made a note of that. And I was very proud in a way to know that it was 72 days, because 72 days felt, while I was in there, it felt like the longest period of time that had ever existed in the history of the universe. 72 days, because each day was a horrendous grind of depression, pain, anxiety, feeling trapped, trying to scrounge some tiny sense of joy out of life, and trying to figure out a way to escape, trying to get some sense of meaning, and feeling like my whole situation was meaningless. I'd lost my freedom because I was sectioned. So I was in a mental health unit, psychiatric unit. I was in two different ones, but both times I was trapped physically and thrown in amongst a bunch of nutters, basically, each with different problems and different manifestations of their problems, whatever, different behaviours, different madnesses. And yeah, so backtracking a bit, there's a personal satisfaction to me for telling my story from my perspective, without diluting it. So another thing that I used to do a lot was I used to give a concession to the traditional view of what happened to me. So I used to call it my psychosis, or my illness, or my mental health problems. And the problem with that for me is that I personally never experienced it as that. What I personally experienced through my own nervous system, through my own consciousness, was, if I summarize it, everyone else suddenly turned against me. People were arguing with me all the time. People were constantly telling me I was ill. I felt like I was being judged. I felt like I was being labelled. I felt like no one was actually trying to understand me. No one did understand me. I felt like I was trying to communicate with people this deep wisdom that I felt like I was in touch with. Because even to say I felt like I was in touch with it is to make a concession to the view that my experience was not valid. The predominant opinion that was going around at the time in the other people was that I had psychosis, and then I had schizophrenia, and I was depressed as well, and I had irrational moods, mood swings, or high and low mood, frantic behavior, and then withdrawal, and all this stuff. And from my perspective, I never saw it in those terms. So to say that I felt like I wasn't ill, but that makes a concession to the viewpoint that actually I was ill. Does that make sense? But from my perspective, I was not ill. And I still see it that I was not ill. I don't know if I'm getting my point across, but for me to say, oh, I believed I wasn't ill, that implies that I've subsequently changed my view of my own experience because of what other people have said. But actually, to get to the truth of it, I was not ill. I never experienced myself as being ill. I never experienced myself as being mentally unwell. So I can't say with truthfulness that I was ill, because to do that would be to take a view of myself that I did not have, and I do not have. I have never had the view that I was ill. I mean, I've said that I was ill, but it's always been on a concession to other people who thought that I was ill. It's been a way to explain my experience easily to other people who would not understand it if I told them what was really going on for me. It's just easier for me to say, oh, I had psychosis, whereas I never experienced what the term psychosis. I never experienced psychosis. All right, other people experienced me having psychosis. I experienced other people telling me that I had psychosis. I experienced other people trying to section me all the fucking time for the fact that they thought and they believed that I had psychosis. What I experienced was a load of people who were trapped in their own mystified view of me, who didn't know what was going on about me, and who would not leave me the fuck alone. I experienced a hell of a lot of dicks, basically, trying to prescribe what was going on for me without actually knowing what was going on for me, without fully asking me what was going on for me. And whenever they did ask me what was going on for me, they judged it and put it into a category of being a mental health disturbance or an illness. Yeah. So my personal experience was not of psychosis. My personal experience was of me finding my true self. My personal experience was of me having an intensification of psychic abilities. My personal experience was of me experiencing life through the eyes of God, or to put it a different way, what my personal experience was, it's experiencing God being revealed to me through the forms of life, such that people appeared as manifestations of God. People appeared as manifestations of my true self. People, the world in total, every experience, every object appeared as a manifestation of God, or of beauty, or of mystical revelation or wisdom, or some kind of feeling of depth. It's hard to put into words what that really is. It's like a feeling the whole world to be yourself, and to be an expression and aspect of yourself. There was also a feeling of exhilaration and freedom around my behavior. There was a sense that a knowing, a real intuitive insight that all the boundaries and parameters that our society functions all the boundaries and parameters that our society uses to function, to keep itself coherent and to stay together and to not turn into chaos, all of those boundaries and parameters are all false. They're all a mental, emotional construction that we have overlaid on the physical world and we have overlaid on each other. And there was that knowing that whatever anyone said was a boundary was not an actual boundary. You could try and create a boundary with words and behavior, but that there was not an actual physical boundary there. So these lines that were supposedly being drawn by society, like whether it be laws, whether it be rules of behavior, whether it be rules of speech, appropriateness, whatever, none of those were real in existence. They were just a mental fabrication that had a lifespan, and they had, like, they weren't an eternal reality, if that makes sense. They weren't solid, and so knowing this, it meant that I could just transgress across all kinds of different boundaries without really a care. I would go into places that I wasn't supposed to be in, just out of curiosity, not necessarily to do any damage. I think I nicked a water bottle, and that's probably the worst thing I've ever done in the whole history of crime. No, okay, I slapped my dad a few times. So there was something else going on there. There's a violence thing, and I almost killed my parents as well with a knife. But I didn't get anywhere near killing them, so I don't know why I describe it as I almost killed them. I was nowhere near killing them. I had the idea to kill them. I picked up a knife. I walked up halfway up the stairs, and then I decided no, that the bread knife was a silly instrument to kill my parents with. And what was I doing? What was I doing? Was it right? No. So that's and I want to try and stick to my experience of those things, because I don't want to cheapen them in reverse, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to let's take the knife thing. Okay, this is a pretty difficult thing for me to talk about, but I feel like I've got enough emotional remove from the whole topic to be able to talk about it more clearly now. I understand it may be disturbing for you as a viewer to hear me talking about the fact that I may well have I walked up the stairs with the intention to kill my parents. That was certainly the case for half a minute or so. So I understand that's disturbing for you maybe, but I've looked at it in my own experience and I've come to terms with that is something that I did. Now, to talk about that from my perspective and try and explain it in a way that conveys how I was experiencing things at the time, it's going to be tricky, but let's try it. So, my parents, when I was going through this period in time where no one understood me and no one seemed to care about me, and everyone was trying to stop me from being the way that I was, and everyone was trying to contain me, label me, say what I was, say how I was feeling, trying to blackmail me in various ways to get psychological help, trying to contain me, trying to section me. Basically, they were against whatever I was saying, and they were against whatever I was doing, and they were against whatever I was feeling, and they were always arguing with my viewpoint on my own experience. Now, for me, that was a particularly difficult situation to be in, and it was causing this intense resentment towards my parents. I hated them because they would keep saying I'm ill all the time. They would keep saying that I was unwell, psychotic, delusional, all these things. And from my perspective, not feeling that was the case, and feeling often that the reverse was the case, that they are just not willing to see how I actually am. They are not willing to step outside of a judgmental viewpoint on everything I was doing, and that if you just allowed yourself to experience me without the filter of all your judgments about me, that you would realize that there is nothing particularly wrong with the way I'm behaving or what I'm saying. It's only because you have this massive mind construction about what I should have been. I felt like, no, that's just okay. It was the case that my parents had a specific image of who I was in their heads. And I went through a transformational process by reading Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, whereby I started to live my life in a more spiritual way in connection with a deeper place within me. Now, my parents not experiencing life through that way, experiencing life purely through conceptual thought and through the mind in their head, and there are all these fractured emotions going on. They weren't experiencing life through inner wisdom. They weren't experiencing life through sensitivity. They weren't experiencing life through their feelings. They're only experiencing life through a fractured, mind constructed veil of perception. So everything pertained to an ego structure in them, and I was a they had a view of me, basically, of what I was like before I went to uni. I went to uni, and also I read this book, and I went through this relationship with Mr. B, which changed my whole life in a way, and disturbed me somewhat. No, did it though? Did it or not? Because I'm actually going to try and cut through this bullshit, because that may well be another story I've told to try and dilute my perspective, that the relationship caused me to go into trauma or whatever. And I did not experience it in that way. That's a subsequent overlay that I put on that subject to make it more explainable to the average person. That is not how I experienced it. In fact, I experienced myself going through a spiritual awakening and a psychic awakening and an intuitive deepening. All right, I experienced a new type of self, a new feeling of self that I had not experienced before, and it was a self that was completely free. It was a self that was completely limitless and boundless in terms of what I was able to do with my mouth and my behavior, and it was a sense of surrender as well, that there was nothing I could do to change how I was behaving. There was a sudden sense of relaxation, or what do you call it, like separation from who I had been before, and it was like, okay, I am now completely free of all the mental constructs that I had about myself, and I am completely committed and present in this moment and able to behave in alignment with whatever this moment, the feeling, the intuitive feeling, the connection to the presence of the moment. I am able to fully act in accordance with that at every single moment, which meant I was able to do any kind of movement which may have been perceived as strange by other people. All right. Now, that was a complete 180 from who I had been before, which was a line towing, authority obeying, scared, somewhat anxious, suffering individual with a very strong narcissistic type ego. So everything was about me. I had this kind of delusion of grandeur before I went through the spiritual awakening, where I thought that major success was destined for me, because my parents had told me basically that I was going to be successful, specifically my dad. And I was going to change the world and all this. Anyway, so as I was saying, I changed my personality structure overnight pretty much. And the first thing that I remember where there was a sudden clash between myself and my parents was I came back from uni after having doing a lot of stand-up comedy and a lot of comparing and a lot of radio shows. And so my confidence to speak with other people in a bantery kind of way had really increased. And I didn't see the reason to speak with my parents in any other way. So I started treating them as friends rather than parents. I started bantering with them in the same sort of way that I might banter with my friends at uni. So I started, for example, observing that my well, I remember sitting outside basically. I remember sitting outside around like for what was it, like a barbecue or a meal outside or something, and I was speaking to my parents like I would banter with a friend or an acquaintance or whatever, and making little jokes and asking them things or whatever in a way that did not protect them from themselves. Like I did not put them into the box of being my parents necessarily, is what I mean. I was transcending the role of them being my parents, and I was no longer going to just start kind of treating them within this limited definition of who they were. I was not going to relate to them as like with rule bound roles. Basically, I was just going to be myself, as I would be myself on stage, as I would be myself on a radio show, as I would be myself with my friends, as I would be myself when I was doing anything, you know. But my parents had a certain view of who I was before I went to uni, and I experienced it. Like I came back from uni one time with this new sense of self, this new sense of fun, this new sense of playfulness, this new ability to kind of just be frisky, if you like, you know, so being fun, being silly with other people, bantering around. And I was just doing this or trying this out with my parents. And they said that I was making them feel uncomfortable. And from my perspective, it felt like they had decided that that was not how I would normally manifest. That was not who I was, and they had started to basically shut off from me. They decided that because I was acting more big, shall we say, more big, more bright, more bouncy, more bubbly, more happy, basically, that was threatening to them. So I noticed that they did not accept this new me. They did not accept that that was me. And from that point onwards, it basically got worse and worse and worse, that my parents just would not accept me as this new way of being that I had found while I was at university. And labels. Labels began. Labels. The labels. The labels. The labels. So many labels began. And also there was a kind of implicit assumption in what they were saying, that I was making them uncomfortable, that it was my fault that they were feeling uncomfortable, like I was creating that feeling in them, and that it was like it was originating in me. That feeling in them was originating in me. So it's like they were making me responsible for how they felt. I don't know if you understand this. This is codependency, basically, where you blame everyone else for how you feel. Like you perceive your emotions to originate outside of yourself, whereas your emotions obviously are experienced in your body, but you have a sense of your emotions, but immediately you project the source of the emotion out to somewhere else. So it's like the case of your football game, your team loses, and you perceive that your team losing creates a feeling of pain inside you. But no, what it is your team loses and you feel pain. They're not necessarily, there's not a cause and effect relationship. In fact, you generate that pain in response to what you see. Or that pain is generated in response to what you've seen, right? But it's not that the game is like directly reaching inside you and destroying your emotions. It's not the case. The two are, there's not a merge of thing, although it can feel like that depending on like your level of awareness. If you don't have the awareness of your emotions, you will experience it that outside events cause inside emotions, and cause internal mental disturbances, or cause pain basically. So obviously physical pain is caused by outside things, but is it really? I mean, we don't actually know, because what I could tell you what this experience boils down to is I see my hand and this thing, and I feel this feeling of, well, let's call it pain in my arm. But other than that, that's all that experience is made of for me. It's made of the seeing of that and the feeling of this locational experience around this area. So it's pain. But is this particular thing here causing the pain here? I don't actually know. It seems to be implied that that is the case. But the truth of it, I don't know how it works. I don't know. Is it causing the pain? Or is this going into there and I just happen to be feeling pain? I don't know. But physical pain is like a bit more tricky to say that is not, it's your, well, technically my arm is responding to the stimulus of that thing being shoved in it. So the pain is being generated by my arm. I'm experiencing that pain in my awareness of my arm. Yeah, tricky stuff when you get deep into this shit, isn't it? All right. So back to the parents thing. So they, from my perspective, they were labeling me as the cause of all their sufferings, and they put all their like baggage from their failing marriage and from their dissatisfaction with their own private lives and their own business lives and their own fucking feelings that they weren't happy to feel in their own private sphere, so they weren't able to access their own feelings. So they used me as a locus of focus of emotion, basically. So it was like, what's wrong with my life? Oh, Ross is wrong with my life. Let's focus all the pain and disturbance that I have in myself into this one person, and let's see how this one person is causing all my pain and problems. That's how I experienced it. I also experienced it that they were not willing to relate to me open-heartedly and honestly. They were not willing to admit their own feelings. It was always my fault, whatever they were feeling, and they would never look at their own experience to report to me on their own experience from their own perspective. They were always looking at me as though I was causing their experience. So whatever suffering they were going through, whatever pain they were going through, they were always looking at me as though it was like, as though I was sending it directly into them, but all they were seeing was like me being the aggressor, me being the bad person kind of thing, me being the ill one. It's because Ross is ill, that's why I'm feeling pain. But they would never speak to me in terms of, I'm feeling distressed right now, or I'm feeling stressed, or I'm in pain, or I don't want you to do that. It was always like, you are doing this to me, and you're unwell, and it just like complete block out of their own actual experience. And what they were doing with their actual experience was, we call it projection. They were projecting their internal experience onto me. And it was almost as though they did like, there was this cloak that they projected around my physical body and my mind space, and all they were seeing was just their own stuff bouncing off me and hitting them back in the face. That's what I saw. I saw that they were not like, it's kind of like, is anyone in there? And they were just like, had these massive blinkers and blinders on them. Now, there's another angle to this, which I have considered, which is that the whole thing was a massive projection of consciousness, God consciousness. So the whole family system became a projection unit, basically. So that each person who is experiencing the family system was projecting their own version of events onto the fucking playing field of consciousness. So that I was projecting my parents to being in mad people, they were projecting me to be mad people, and the whole thing was this kind of construct of projection. And some people in the spiritual thing would say that the whole of society is basically a projection of consciousness, and that I am here actually as a projection of your consciousness, and you there, when I see a person, they're a projection of my own consciousness, and that what we are in fact is not this physical body, but we're like a kind of projection unit that projects this physical body into form, as in it kind of like emerges from what we are at a deeper place, and the whole physical world emerges from a deeper place inside what we are, which goes beyond the physical body. So I would imagine it to be like, imagine all these things that you can see and all these bodily sensations. Imagine they have a vanishing point, that you take everything, all the sensation that you have, and you take it back and you take it back, like, and you kind of draw lines from all the things you can see, and it goes back, and then you've got these physical sensations, and they're all kind of projecting backwards. They've got like lines, and they all go back to this kind of singularity, this point of intelligence, or this sort of decision-making faculty of consciousness. And that is what you really are, is the decision-making manifestation unit of life, the projection unit of life. And so that's what you really are, that intelligent decision-making kind of projection unit of life. And that therefore all of this is a projection of you as consciousness, and that consciousness is synonymous with God. So we are all actually just consciousness, which is to say God, projecting the physical body, projecting the mind space, projecting all these physical items and sensations in the body, that all of these are being manifested, created, and they're emerging out of what we really are at a deeper place. And yeah, that's what we are. We are that deeper place from which everything is experienced, and from which everything is decided, from which every perception manifests, from which every sensation is referred back to. Every sensation refers back to this consciousness, is experienced by and created by, it emerges from what we are at a deeper place. Now, sometimes I actually know that to be the case. Most of the time it's just kind of a belief that I think would be nice if that was the case, because then I could just say, right, I want to change this in the deciding factor of consciousness right at the back there, and I want to levitate a mushroom like that. Well, I want to levitate this little ball. Oh, I just did, using the hands. But what's the difference between just having it in the hands and to actually levitate it? You know, I'd like to be able to just say, right, decision-making faculty of the universe, let's just levitate that now. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't believe it enough. Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, oh, I did it. Oh, look, I levitated it. Oh, yeah, levitated it real big. And it's staying there. It's, see? All right. Okay, so that's the real deep, hardcore megalodon, mega fucking shark versus giant octopus bullshit of my supposed psychosis, which was imposed upon me from the outside world, which I never actually experienced. A psychosis. I don't know. I don't think anyone actually has ever experienced a psychosis. Because a psychosis can always be reduced to various changing perceptions in an observing consciousness. So let's say, what was mine? My psychosis would be made up, from my internal perspective, of people being dicks to me on the outside world, me hearing people calling me mad, me hearing people calling me unwell. That's my psychosis. Me being in touch with the universal flow of energy, me being in touch with God, me being in touch with my true self, me being happy, me feeling free. That's my psychosis. The other people around me, I see them, because this is taking it to the perspective of consciousness. I see the other people around me as being aggressive towards me, verbally aggressive. I see the other people around me as putting judgments onto me. I'm receiving the other people around me as judgmental. I'm seeing the people around me are calling me unwell. I am feeling judged. I am feeling hateful in response to them. I'm feeling turbulent in response to what they are continuing to say about me. I feel like they won't give me a break. I feel like they're hounding me. I feel like they are constantly watching everything I'm doing and finding it to be a symptom of an illness that they have created in their own minds of me. I experienced outer chaos, outer turmoil. Let's try and describe what I was experiencing internally as well. Internally, I was experiencing psychic impressions. Means I was able to intuitively sense other people's emotions. I was intuitively
able to know other people's subconscious processes. I was intuitively able to know, to some degree, what other people were thinking, like roughly what they're thinking about. Just kind of like on a very, like, when you just get a hunch about something and you say, you're worried about this, aren't you? Or you're thinking about this, aren't you? Or I can sense that you're kind of concerned about this. Just being able to sense that in what other people are saying, which is something that I can do now as well. It's just kind of, you could say it's intuitive guesswork. We just get a real sense of something, and it's like obviously the case. What everyone has been, what people have been saying, it leads to suggest that they are worried about this or that they're feeling that or blah blah blah, whatever. But what I experienced of my parents was they were so in denial of their own feelings and their own experience that whenever I would present my intuitive understanding of them, they would deny. No, it isn't. No, it's because you're ill. No. It was kind of this massive defense mechanism that I perceived in my parents against any truth and any freedom of thought would clash up against in their minds. And so how did I experience that? Well, I experienced it as my dad being an utter terrorist and hounding me and trying to convince me that the thoughts in my head were inaccurate and invalid, and the experiences that I was having I was not actually having, and that everything that I was saying was an inaccurate perception, and that I was causing all the feelings that they were experiencing, he was experiencing. For example, my mum was like saying something, and my dad was, they were always crowding around me, trying to convince me of the fact that I was wrong and that I was ill and that everything I was saying was bad and wrong. And my dad was like really aggressively trying to sort of convince me that I should have been behaved differently on one occasion. And they were in my room. I sat in my chair, and he was like right up next to me, and saying like, "You really loudly, really aggressively, you've upset your mum," or yeah, something like that. Like, "You've upset your mum," and I went, "I don't care." And then like
she cried even more or something. And because I said these words, I don't care, I had caused all this disturbance in these people. And my dad went even more apeshit because I'd said, I don't care. Because those words had caused his emotions. Do you see what I'm trying to tell you here? That the main problem that these people had was that they weren't able to experience their emotions firsthand. They were always experiencing them as a function of my behavior. They were always experiencing their internal experience as though it was coming from me, as though it was caused by me, as though it originated in me. Maybe it was. Maybe I was in touch with that God sensation to the point that I could literally control other people's emotions in a cause and effect relationship, that I could just snap my fingers and they would feel rage. I don't know. But what I understand it as is that these people were so unable to experience their own emotions firsthand and their own perceptions firsthand and their own kind of body systems firsthand, that they were projecting continuously that the location of those experiences was starting here and then traveling to them and destroying them, threatening them. That's what I experienced. And I would tell them such things. I'd say, like, no, look, you're feeling this. I didn't cause that feeling, okay? Let's try and separate out. You are feeling that. That is your feeling. It is not occurring in me. Like, this is a pretty tricky thing to try and describe to someone who's very much invested in the outside world as causing their internal experience. Because when you're talking to someone who deeply feels like this pen is offensive to them, right? They think the offense originates in the pen, that the pen is the problem. But the pen is just the pen. The pen is just neutral. But their feeling is so strong that it overpowers their ability to realize, oh yeah, there's the pen and here is me. There's the pen and here's my emotion about the pen. There's the pen. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's the pen. There's the pen and here's my thinking about the pen. You know, they're in different locations within consciousness. So yeah, that's me trying to explain the dynamics that I experienced. Because I'll tell you why, I've never been able to explain that, my viewpoint of the whole situation, because subsequent to me being incarcerated in the psychiatric ward and being drugged and being numbed to my experience and my own perceptions being invalidated continuously as it being explained away, that everything that I experienced and every belief I held and every knowing that I had and every expression of my behavior was all a symptom of this thing that had been called psychosis or depression or mania. They used to say manic. I was manic and then withdrawn. To me, there was no manic and withdrawn. It was just I was doing what I wanted to do at that time. You know, if I felt like I wanted to go and rest, I would go and rest. If I felt like I wanted to go and explore the mysteries of like the fucking undergrowth of this room, for example, and find out what is here and how can I see all the different interesting facets of these items and whatever and explore them, like, whoa, yeah. Because I was like receiving so much more information from everything than I would normally experience. I was like, whoa, yeah, I can sort of really absorb a lot from very limited stimulus, and it was very interesting to just like look at a piece of paper for a while and be like, whoa. It's like an acid trip, basically. Even though I've never done acid, so I can't really comment. All right, yeah. So subsequently, after being incarcerated in the psychiatric ward, I became depressed, and like during the psychiatric ward period, basically it was a massive invalidation experience. So I started to talk about my experience from the viewpoint of other people. I started to accept the narrative that surrounded me
around my own experience, I started to accept that as that what they say is true about what I was experiencing. So I took on the view that the mental health professionals had, that this was a psychosis, because they'd convinced me through their fucking brainwashing to see my experience in terms of symptoms, to see that, oh yes, it is actually the case that I had these symptoms, therefore I have psychosis. Therefore, everything I previously thought was wrong, everything I previously experienced was only a manifestation of this psychosis illness. Right? None of it had any validity. It's almost as though like they were trying to tell me that I was delusional, therefore none of those things happened. That I never saw what I saw, I never heard what I heard, I never felt what I felt, I never thought what I thought. The beliefs that I held were delusional at all times throughout that period. So it was a massive invalidation exercise, as in the other people, I perceived them to be basically telling me that my whole experience was invalid. So I started to take on this subdued, unassertive view of my own previous experience. So I started to kind of toe the line, basically. I started to conform my thinking and beliefs about the past to what everyone else thought of my past. So I started to say it was a psychosis. I started to say that I was ill, even though I had never experienced myself as being ill. I had only personally experienced the world going nuts around me and the world hounding me while I was just trying to get some fucking peace and explore my mystical adventures. and also to try and communicate this mystical experience that I was going through with them, which they were not. They were all constantly arguing against. So to round up, just try and finish this little point and then I'll finish the video. So I took on this view that it was a psychosis, it was an illness, which I had to deny my own personal experience. But by the point that I came out of the psychiatric ward, I was medicated, I was depressed. I was feeling depressed, other people didn't have to tell me that I was feeling depressed. I know that I was feeling depressed. I was feeling fucking depressed. All right, I didn't want to do anything. I suppose I was just willing to accept whatever I had to accept in order to get out of the psychiatric ward, for one thing. And I wanted the depression to go away. I was willing to just say yes to fucking anything, and not really question it. Like, for example, early on after coming out of the psychiatric ward, we did a little application for what is now universal credit, but before it was disability living allowance. We did an application for disability living allowance, and there were some boxes that we ticked that I said yes to because I was just feeling too weak and unassertive to say, actually, I can make a meal for myself, and whatever other ones that we said that were true that weren't actually true. But I was so fucking weak and willing to just acquiesce to the narrative and to the system and to the other people around me that I just let them tick a load of boxes for me that weren't actually true and that I didn't believe in, and that if anyone asked me a question about them, I would have had to tell them the truth, that it was all lies. So I received a load of money for a few years on the basis of lies, because I was too depressed and unassertive to be able to feel able to stand up to these authority figures who were supposedly trying to help me, whereas my heart of hearts, I knew that this information that I'd given was not correct. And that actually played a big part on my self-esteem for a while, because I was receiving this money that I felt like I shouldn't be receiving because the facts weren't correct at the time of inception of this thing. So I went through a whole big period where I was like, okay, but I need the money, but morally it doesn't feel right because it doesn't feel based in truth. So eventually I actually rang them up and told them. And even the person at the end of the phone said, oh, you should just leave it. So they obviously didn't care whether it was true or not. And so it's just a fuck. So I got off that benefit eventually anyway, because it was just,
I didn't want to go around holding a disability benefits card, like for the bus and for the train, which I felt was based in some level of bullshit. So I stopped it and I cut up the cards and I sort of went free. I'm a normal person. You know, I never experienced myself as having a disability. I never experienced myself as having a mental illness, apart from a feeling of depression. And apart from sometimes the experience of this mystical thing was a bit terrifying in its own way, because it was like I was coming really close to what you'd call like complete ego death. So I was like, I had absolutely no sense of certainty of what was going to happen next in the future. There were a few moments where I was terrified of like it's just this sense that anything could happen, and I was really afraid that, I don't know, I'll have to save that for another video because that was a whole experience in itself. So the knife thing as well, I realise I haven't explained that. That needs a whole fucking video about it, really, because that was some awareness experience that I was going through, that I was going through this like following my impulses thing, and there was an impulse there and I was following my awareness around it, which was taken from an exercise from another book, and it led me to want to act on my impulse to hurt and kill my parents, which was coming up because my parents were being fucking dicks, and I genuinely wanted to kill them because they were being dicks the whole time to me and treating me really badly and fucking abusing me and being verbally abusing me, emotionally manipulative towards me, you know, treating me like shit and not allowing me to have my voice around it, and that I was always the wrong one and they were always the right one, and their views of the situation were always correct in their eyes, and my views of the situation never had any validity, which meant that I was basically being pushed into a fucking corner, and experiencing a feeling of oppression and being trapped and being cornered and being labelled and being judged and being harmed and being verbally assaulted and also physically intimidated by my parents, and physically manhandled by my mum at one point, woman handled. Yeah. And there were things that I was doing as well that were physically aggressive, like I slapped my dad. I used to pour water over my mum's head occasionally. I was trying to snap them out of this fucking insane mindset by trying to give them a shock of some kind to snap them out of these behaviours that they were treating me with, and it didn't work. But yeah, so the knife thing, I was just kind of following that impulse to listen to myself, and I understand that's going to seem disturbing to some people. It is somewhat disturbing to me still. I can't really. I can explain it. I'll explain it from my perspective. Whether or not that's disturbing to you, that's your thing. For me, I looked at that experience a while ago while I was writing the psych ward stuff, and for me, it scares me. Or it scared me. It doesn't scare me anymore because I've gone through it so many times that I'm now okay with it, kind of. I'm not really okay with talking about it yet, so that's why I'm fumbling around it. Because basically what it is I don't want to appear like a really horrendous person, but that situation makes me out to be like a really horrendous person. But I'm not that person now, and also at the time, nothing even happened. I didn't actually do anything. I just felt like I wanted to and I was going to, and then I stopped. But there's some part of me that like finds even the fact that I picked up this knife and went halfway up the stairs with the intention of them, I find that really abhorrent. I find that really disturbing that I did that. Yeah, but now looking back, I completely understand why I felt that urge, because I felt like I was being tyrannized basically by my parents. Yeah.
So don't know. Gonna have to leave it there because I don't know. I was supposed to only do an hour.